All right, this is take 4 of my attempt to read one of the shortest meditations that I wrote this day, the 23rd of April, 2004 originally. It's the 23rd of April. It's getting late. It's almost into the 25th day of April. For various reasons, I've had to start over. Now this is the 4th time, so I'm just going to read it straight through. And in the matter of getting it done because it needs to get done. And that is maybe the case of the writing of this very meditation, which is further discussion of the allegory of the cave. The final 4th moment, actually. The final turning occurs with the liberated one's return back to the cave. This is the most open-ended moment in the story, for it is not clear from the story itself why the liberated one would return. This is made less clear by the events that occur when he descends to his former dwelling place. In the midst of this ambiguity, which we identify positively as the essence of the teachability offered by an allegory, myth, or a parable, we have offered a reading that understands the liberated one's return as a response to the silent calling of his former companions. The calling is offered in the memory which coincides with the revelation he receives about the process of being. Quote, "Well then, if he recalled to mind his former habitation and what passed for wisdom there, and his fellow bondsmen, do you not think that he would count himself happy in the change and pity them?" Unquote. We should also underline that the descent is completed without the need of a guide. He negotiates the descent without any assistance, although the guide does return with him, but remains silent and in the background, away from the cave dwellers. The arrival to his former abode echoes the initial moment of disorientation he experienced when the process of liberation was put underway. Quote, "Now imagine what would happen if he went down again to take his former seat in the cave. Coming suddenly out of the sunlight, his eyes would be filled with darkness. He might be required once more to deliver his opinion on those shadows in competition with the prisoners who had never been released, while his eyesight was still dim and unsteady, and it might take some time to become used to the darkness." Unquote. We have little difficulty imagining that upon returning back into the darkness of the cave, he would be again compelled to readjust to the circumstances. And if his transformation into the modality of learning is authentically complete, he would not seek to deliver the news of his journey as a representative of the world beyond the cave. Rather, he would seek to reconnect with his former companions and to become part of their company again. But this readjustment is not akin to the disorientation that he experienced in the first moments of his liberation. The story says nothing about perplexity, but emphasizes his attempt to rejoin with the others. This rejoinment is quite unclear. We suggest his return was propelled by the empathy evoked by the memory of, quote, "those who were chained with him in those days," unquote. But what is involved in this rejoinment? We can only conjecture that he does not retake his former position as a prisoner and does not put on the shackles that have been removed from him. This important moment is variously translated as the moment where he attempts to, quote, "take his former seat," Cornford, "take his old place," Shorey, or sit in the same place as before, Heidegger. The transformation through liberation implies that he's incapable of returning fully to his former position. The results are predictable. He's now acquired a perspective, multiple perspective, has been turned around, and this has rendered him incapable of being relocated back into the non-perspectival location of the prisoner. His former companions recognize his transformation, but misunderstand it as a sign of the ascent's detrimental effects. Quote, "They would laugh at him and say that he had gone up only to come back with his sight ruined. It was worth no one's while even to attempt the ascent. If they could lay hands on the one who was trying to set them free and lead them up, they would kill him." Unquote. So this is an important meditation because it a couple things. One, it sort of shows that the transformation that's happened post-emancipation in the process being turned towards learning, that once you make that move or once you are on the way to learning, you can't go back. I think this is a very powerful message that Plato is conveying, and it's really important to underline that. And I kind of am experiencing that myself. And now that I've sort of gone through this process of working on this new project, that has really shifted my paradigm with regard to how I'm thinking about philosophy and, sort of exploring and looking at new philosophical language. I just can't really just go back. I mean, I could, but I would be sort of, no, I couldn't. I'd be abandoning the project that's been shown to me, and it would be inauthentic, although that's not necessarily the language I'd want to use. But Plato's, and if one could go back, you could say, then the transformation hasn't really happened, that the force of the paideia hasn't worked. So I think what Plato is saying is, in this case, the paideia has worked quite powerfully, and there's no going back. But what's so compelling to me, and what's so important to me, and something that I've been emphasizing throughout, is this desire to connect, and this need to connect, this desire to connect with his what I call his demos. The desire to connect to the demos, to rejoin his companions, is the desire, I want to say, that's compelled by the very paideia. So what was shown, and I tried to make this point in some of the previous meditations, what was shown to him was sort of the twofold play, which is the dynamic relationship of the truth that's disclosed in being, the truth of concealment on the one hand, and the truth of disclosure on the other hand, and that relationality is just pervasive throughout all of being. And what the paideia has revealed and has shown him, and what learning discloses, is the sort of fundamental relationality that we all experience. First and foremost, we're grounded and rooted in terrestrial. We're moving along the way. And then the second thing is that this is most fulfilling when we're in the company of friends, and philosophy, as Arendt has indicated, and I've talked about it now for weeks, is something that happens in sort of in fellowship, right? It's a congregational experience, as I like to talk about it. So this is another very important point here, that this desire to go back. Now, the allegory, the various translations, and one of the things I'm doing is I'm reimagining that there's this desire to go back. If you go and read the third part, what the voice of Socrates, who's telling the story, says is, in fact, he has to be compelled to go back. That the life in the open region outside of the cave is so awesome and so great that he doesn't want to go back. And so Socrates says that he has to be forced to go back. But I want to suggest, in my reimagining of the allegory, that he longs to go back. He longs to go back to gather his friends and to bring them back out into the open region. And that power of reconnection is, and the desire for reconnection, the desire to be with others, is so compelling that he goes back. But he can't go back, and that's kind of like the tragedy of the story, is that, and it leaves it open, the question. It ends there. That's what I just read. The last lines are the end of the allegory. It just ends where they laugh at him and they say, "Wow, you went up there only to get ruined." All of a sudden, they know there's an up there, but we'll leave that aside, because I'm not interested in quarreling with the logic of the allegory, where those who didn't know about anything about an outside now know about it. Regardless, it drops off with them saying, they laugh at him. They said, "Oh, you got ruined," and then they have sort of like this deep anger and contempt towards this guide who's standing there, who led the prisoner out, and if they could, they would surely kill him. That's the last lines of the allegory. If they could lay hands on the man who was trying to set them free and lead them up, they would kill him. End of story. So, and it sort of ends there, and then we're sort of left thinking, okay, what are we supposed to do with that? And that's where I'm going to pick it up tomorrow. So I successfully recorded this, I think, in 10 minutes after 4 tries, and I'm going to leave it at that on this 23rd day of April 2014, commemorating the writing that happened 10 years ago on this date, but did not end up in Being and Learning for some reason, and I don't know why.